Good afternoon. This is Ed Salzberg, and thank you for signing up and attending our webinar. Speaking for Jimmy Baker and Sean Campbell, I welcome you to the event. I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of it. Here's what we're going to do today. I'll introduce the speakers briefly, do a quick overview of what we're going to be presenting, and then get into three presentations that we're going to be talking about, focusing on how to prosper in a shrinking market and focusing really clearly on small businesses. We had received some questions, and some of them are addressed in the presentations. Others are not, and we're going to address those right at the end of the briefing. We've got some special offers for you, and I also want to tell you about our next webinar event, which is going to be on January 22nd. So Jimmy Baker, many of you know, is on the West Coast, but spent many years in D.C. He's a very experienced government consultant and BD leader. I cut my teeth at SAIC and SRA, also Battelle, led programs and led business development for many years. And Sean Campbell is a senior consultant with ePipeline, one of the best business intelligence services around. And without the kind of business intelligence that you get from ePipeline, it's very difficult to compete. Here are the questions that we're going to address through this session. The two that are grayed out are actually in the briefings themselves, and then we're going to try to get through as many of the others right at the end. And you can see they really focus right down on small businesses and how to succeed in as a small business, including what does it take to graduate from some of the preference programs, and we're using the 8A program as a kind of an archetype example. On your GoToMeeting window, on the bottom, you'll see a little drop-down that says questions. If you do have questions, please insert them there, and right at the end, we'll cover as many of those as we can, and those that we can't get to, we'll answer separately. Let me just start. This little session is, in a way, not exactly focused on small business, but it has very strong small business implications. We know that the federal budget is going to decrease. I don't know how much, but the government spent $450 billion on contracts in 2012. Pile of money. But even if it drops 20%, that still means about $360 billion in spending, which is still a pile of money. It could drop further than that, and we're still talking about real money. That means the U.S. government will remain the global outsourcing leader, which is why it's important if you're a contractor, an IT contractor, a programmatic policy contractor, a services contractor, a vendor of equipment, that the U.S. government should be on your radar screen if it's not now. But clearly, because the budgets are dropping, the market is going to be much more competitive. So what do you do about it? Well, the winners are going to have better competitive processes, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. What we talk about applies to large businesses, but it's even more important for small businesses to have really strong competitive processes, because you really need to compete as though you are a big business, because eventually you are going to be competing with those firms if you're successful in your preference programs. And so what do small businesses need to know in order to be competitive in this market, especially a down market? We're going to discuss that today. The competitive processes are even more important in a dropping market because there is no rising sea to rise all boats. Sean is going to lead off discussing the small business contract landscape, which is the ePipeline strength, tracking what contracts are coming out. Jimmy Baker is going to follow that up, looking at the set-aside mandates and whether they really matter to the government, and if so, how you can use them effectively. And I'm going to talk about efficient business development processes for small business. Without those processes and without understanding the mandates and without a good way to determine the contract landscape, you're at a competitive disadvantage. So Sean, I'm going to turn this over to you to talk about that small business contract landscape.
Thank you very much, Ed. I appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. My name is Sean Campbell with ePipeline, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of the landscape, really, of what you're looking at here on the screen is the word landscape. You've got to look at it as a giant open field. There is a lot of opportunities within the government for large businesses as well as small businesses. A lot of companies that start out in the market, they then look to the advantages and the usage of the economic indicators one company can list themselves under within the government sector. There are over 1,700 pre-RFPs for IT only right now that are a total value of $280 billion that are set for the next 5 years. For the next year alone, there's 800 opportunities, or over 800 opportunities, worth $98 billion for all pre-RFPs. And they always have a set aside that could pop into any one of them. Even though it might be a full and open market, it could also have an 8A or a hub zone or a minority owned or woman owned or SDVOSB. And all the companies and everybody that's in the teams for each company for business development needs to understand how to incorporate what you've already have as a company. Let's say you are an 8A, or let's say you are an SDVOSB, how to tap into those appropriate opportunities. And if you can change the slide for me, thank you. What I've got up here, I pulled from ePipeline. There's a lot of information out there on the internet, as well as throughout the government websites that you can look up on a regular basis. You would then identify in one report within ePipeline, as an example, is what I pulled up here, is a breakdown of all the set-asides that are incorporated within the government right now. As you could see, there are a large number of them that are not specifically set aside to an SBA or an 8A or an SDVOSB. However, the government has to hit its mark on specific points within each year for the government fiscal year under their budget. Whenever you're identifying the opportunities, you might hit a brick wall and identify a large opportunity that you would most likely not have a real chance of winning as a prime, but yet you could go after as a sub. That's a whole other conversation. However, if you are an 8A or an SDVOSB or woman-owned, the government is going to have certain breakouts for a set aside within a larger opportunity, and you need to leverage that. And with the utilization of information that's out there, you can hone in on what matters for your team without wasting your time. If you can switch over to the next slide. Here is a breakdown of the IT awards under one NAICS code as an example, 541512. So a lot of companies that I've spoken with over the years always mention to me, well, I cannot find the right opportunity for my specific economic indicator. And I would go in and I would identify where they would need to look. And you can break it out in any way you want from the internet, but, you know, again, not as a sales tool, but for individuals to look at what I'm using here is ePipeline is able to bring everything in a one-stop shop. When you are trying to identify opportunities, you need to understand the market. You need to understand who's doing work where and with what agencies. What agencies are leveraging SDVOSBs heavy this month or next month or over the next year. Once you identify that, you're going to be able to pinpoint the value of what you hold right now as an economic indicator or government certification, if you will. And this list right here is just a breakdown over the last 3 years of what has happened under one NAICS code. So your team can actually identify how to leverage what you've already got and specifically go forward in the future, hence running your own new listing for a pipeline. Next. In this slide here is a listing of set-aside awards by the agencies. A lot of customers or clients that I've worked with over the years have explained to me they do not understand how the government is awarding it and when they're going to award it. So if you look at the historical viewpoints and identify the market from what the government has done over the last couple of years and keep traction with an SBA program, woman-owned or SDVOSB program that is out there for the government to help you. Remember, the government's there to help you. their mandate is to make sure that they are there to help, but it's never that easy. If, in fact, that you sit there and you identify an agency that you are specifically wanting to hone in on, then at that point you can identify how they've worked and moving forward how you think they would work. From there you can go to the next slide and make, oh, I'm sorry, if you go back to the one we pulled out, the other one, you would be able to run the opportunities on an ongoing basis. And these can also be parts of multi-awards involving full and open, 8A, hub zone, all mixed into one. So it could be ending up under the multi-award, but yet you might not even be able to see that until it's too late. So you're going to be able to run a listing within the government and find out where you and your team need to be at the right time. This is where you can also go to have the knowledge ahead of time, and it will allow your team a leg up and ready yourselves now. You got to know your FARs. You got to understand the programs that are out there to help you. There are a lot of prime contracting and subcontracting assistant programs. You got to make sure that you've got your SBA certification programs under your belt, and making sure that everybody on your team has a certain understanding of where they're going to go and march down and what avenues on what daily basis. Because any certain government program is not always for a specific small SBA listed company. It could be for an SBA or a standard size, but they're generally looking at the number of the employees, and yet you've already got your certification. A larger company, they don't have it. They're going to then look for the SBA that they can either partner with or joint venture with or use under a mentor protege program. And those are all avenues that you can always enhance your company's revenue in the long run. But to understand the landscape, you have to hone in on more of a understanding of how they're going to break them out, and then move forward with identifying the opportunities moving forward. And through, as an example, ePipeline, you're going to be able to run it where you can see upwards to 60+ months in advance notice. And with that being, a major statement, there's not always 100% of opportunities that are going to hit the market. However, your team's going to be able to find that out long before it's going to waste your time. And I can always enhance any questions at the end of this, answer any questions. If, in fact, anybody wants to have a one-on-one meeting, I would be more than willing to do a WebEx meeting at your convenience. And at the same time, there's a colleague of mine named Jimmy Baker, and I would like to turn it over to him right now to allow him to bring you through how to manage the mandates.
Good afternoon, folks. Appreciate you joining us. I want you to get your pen and papers ready because we're going to give you some real tactical tips. And just so you can put things in perspective, I was the Director of Business Development for a startup 8A company. I probably understand more of your challenges and realities than anyone. I've lived through it. I've had to look into bleak pipelines and figure out how we're going to do things. And I'm going to share with you some tactics of things that you can do in your organization to get a firm up on your pipeline. And we're going to look, Ed, why don't you go ahead and move on to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about the small business goals, but here's the bottom line of having done this for a number of years. Over the last decade, I've consulted for many small businesses. The reality with the small business program is it was designed to help small businesses. I own a small business. And it was designed to help us get more of the government contracts, so larger companies weren't controlling them. The reality with all of the small business officers that I've run into is none of them have ever closed a deal in the government. They haven't gone through the pipeline. They haven't had to face payroll. So when we get this data from them, we also have to take it from a grain of salt. There's some great sad news and OSDVUs out there. But the reality is we need to get smarter about how we approach a government. I wanted up on your screen right now, it's just a blurb. I wanted to let you know you're going to see across the different agencies, they all have a 23% goal of awarding to small businesses. This is where it stems from. There's always a source where things go from. And if you'll go ahead and move me to the next slide, this is just a layout over the last 6 years. And as you can see, the government was trying for 23%, but in all cases here, they didn't make it. And what that can equate to are, literally billions of dollars that don't go into small businesses. What we put together on the next slide is actually a grade listing of how government's rated itself. So you also have to look into that. The website's there for you, but there's a couple takeaways I would have with this. If your company is a small business, I would look at the ones that have A's because they're going to be friendlier to me. I would also look at the folks that have F's and C's because they're the ones that need to do better. And with the techniques I'm about to show you, if you can go into these places and show a solution to a problem, your small business status is a big plus at the end of the day. And we'll talk about how to deal with that. If you'd go ahead and move to my next slide, Ed, I'd appreciate it. So here's the bottom line, and this is something, like I said, I worked with a startup 8A, and we went over from zero to a couple $1 million. And you're always focused on creating revenue. How do I do it? And I, trust me, I've run around to all the small business conferences, all the meetings, everything they tell you to do. I've gone out to the primes. I've uploaded names and databases. But having done that and been somewhat frustrated with the process, I think you've got to get back to the basics. And I think in any sale and any deal that you've ever won, it was more because you knew how you helped that customer and they saw the value. And then your small business accolades are add-ons to that. I'd like to move to the next slide. And this is where I want you all to, these are really strong takeaways. Ultimately, when you, and I'm working with this, one of my clients right now I'm working with in the Department of Veterans Affairs space, and I'm telling you that we are knocking it out of the ballpark because we're taking this approach. You need to understand what are the real issues impacting government right now. And there's a couple of them. It's all about the cloud, the security, the ability to have something mobile, and how that ultimately impacts a citizen. You need to spend some time out at the Federal CIO Council reading their documents. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, and you go to the next slide. You're also going to need to understand what are the real challenges impacting the folks that you're calling on. In my world, we're going to give you an example. We're going to take this. Last month, we did a case study on the Department of Homeland Security, and for those of you missed it, it's out on my website. I think Ed has the link buried in here later in the presentation, but we showed you, a verbatim, step-by-step guide how you skin an agency. For those of you that, say, sell technology services, we're going to give an example from the IT budget. You want to go out, and everything has to start with where there's funding. And there's some really important columns on this. You want to understand what is the DME, that stands for Development, Modernization, Enhancement money for the current budget year you're in. You see Ed circling that on your screen right now. And we can go to the next slide, Ed. What's the big deal about that is you want to be going after programs that actually have DME, means new money funded into them. The budget represents two numbers. You have steady state, which is, all the money going for lights, people, everything, buildings, etc. And then you have the new money coming into it. And what's critical for your company is to begin to chasing things that do have either an increase in their steady state or brand new money coming into it. So how do you get to it? Looking at your site right now on your screen, there's a website there. If you go into this, you will literally go out to the White House's website and you scroll down about 3/4 of the way, and there's the report for the federal IT spending for the budget year. You should know beyond a shadow of a doubt with your BD guys, your capture team, of the agencies that you're going after, do they have the funding to pay for you? We're going to show you how you find that. Let's go to the next slide, please. One of the really important techniques that I learned along my journey when I was kind of running around the Beltway trying to figure out how to position our 8A is that you need to understand what the government needs that you have. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. But ultimately, everything stems back to the finances they have to pay for it. One of the techniques that I recommend, and I drink my own medicine all the time with my consulting practice and the work I do with clients. Make a short list of what you do. Systems engineering, technical assistance, web development, whatever it is in those areas. Now, next year, one of the things we're going to do is we're actually going to do a study where I'm going to take you through, I think it's A through X, or all the columns on the budget. We're going to show you what those really mean to you. But bottom line is, if you do a keyword search, I'm on a Mac, so it's Command F, or maybe if you're on a PC, it's Control F, and you type in those keywords for a particular agency, it'll actually take you to the spot on the spreadsheet. And for a lot of these agencies, this is over 6,000 budget line items. A lot of agencies have 300 to 400 budget line items. And it's a really big task. And what you're going to do is you're going to highlight that DME column and the budget year. And you're looking for programs that have an increase in money there that match what you do. And from that, your team can actually track this back to the office and the people that are doing this, and you can have a way to look at funded deals. Let's go on to the next slide. There's some other important areas that I want you all to look at, and this is for any agency. We just happen to be using Homeland Security because we did a case study on this, but for any agency that y'all are going after, I highly recommend this approach. Before you ever knock on a door, create a marketing campaign, or write a proposal, make sure you've read the budget. If they don't have money, they're not going to buy stuff from you. Look at their strategic plan. Most agencies will map out a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. You can generally find this kind of data on the CIO's website. You always want to look at, and if it's a larger agency, for instance, things like the Veterans Affairs. I mean, they're the size of Target and Ford Motor Company. Each of their CIOs may even have their own webpage, but you want to look at a specific CIO's webpage. The IT dashboard is a great way to look at their portfolio. The other thing that I like to look at, and again, you can read everything about this, and we can go ahead and move to the next slide, Ed, is that the GAO and OMB reports are some of the neatest ways that I've closed deals. And essentially, we've gone out and we've been able to find government agencies have a problem that we can solve, and we're able to contact them. These are marvelous reports. They give in detail what the problem is, how they're trying to fix it, and they even have names you can call. And as you're building your pipeline, you're going to look at, as Sean mentioned, you can use pipeline to look at awarded contracts that are coming out of the small business. Go and bid against someone. The whole goal of the small business program is to give it to new small businesses and help them grow. Look at that. Look at the budget. Look at the GAO. You also ultimately want to figure out who you're going to call, because once you have identified either a task order or a piece of work that you want to go, you're going to need to figure out who you're going to call and why they're going to talk to you. Later in the presentation, we can go to the next slide. I'm actually going to talk about some of the techniques that I've seen that you want to incorporate into your rhetoric when you go approach an agency. This last little piece is a piece of gold. If you haven't heard anything else, please have this be your takeaway from today's talk. Most agencies represent their major IT investments. This stems back to the Klinger-Cohen Act. But the bottom line is that they have to show their major IT investments out on their websites. They fill out a form called 300A. In that form is where they put their business cases. And as you can imagine, as a sales guy, that is a phenomenal thing to go and read, because they're telling you about the challenges, their problems. Depending on the agency, some of them are a little more detailed. Others of them are very short, but you can learn a great deal about what the major technology investments are. In a perfect world, you can map these right back to the Exhibit 53s, which is the IT budget. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so let me just take a quick pause. Right now, Sean showed you that you need to get some kind of access to monitor all the opportunities. I would take Sean up on his offer to try ePipeline out, and I'd be looking at every awarded small business contract in the agencies that I'm targeting. We've taught you that, although agencies have small business goals, frankly, they fail a lot of times in meeting it, and it's going to be up to you to show the government how you solve a problem. Look at their strategy, look at the big picture, and walk in the door to an opportunity that you know is funded, that your company has a value to, and reiterate to someone in the government why you should be there and how you solve your problem. Now we'll go to the next slide, but at the end of the day, you want to demonstrate to someone that you have a knowledge of the problems that are hitting them, and you're going to show them how to do that. And I want to just take a pause here. I'm working with a couple clients right now, and we had a meeting with a director for a secretary's initiatives at a specific agency the other day. And my client and I were on the phone together with this person. We asked him, we go, did we articulate and let you know that we understood your issues? And he said, you guys hit him out of the ballpark. And what his point was, and we went on to have a really good discussion, but we'd clearly shown him, we understand what your problems are. I'm going to hit a couple things really quick. Never, ever, ever go into a presentation and say, hi, I'm small disadvantage, 8A, hub zone, veteran-owned, woman minority-owned company, and we have 35 people and 2 offices. No one cares about that. What they care about is what you're trying to fix, and that information should come at the end. For instance, I only recommend doing PowerPoint presentations 3 to 7 slides at the max. The first couple slides are going to be about the agency and the problem you've identified and the money that's around it. It's very important. The next couple of slides are what I call your return on investment, your unique selling proposition to them. What is it that they would gain by working with you? Is it a mobile solution? Is it cloud? I mean, we read the federal CIO's key issues at the very beginning. These are things that are getting government's attention. How do you help them, and what is it that you solve? The last part of this is really maybe a snapshot of the company. You know, and typically what I do with a lot of my clients is the very last slide. For those of you that have been in the business a long time, it's an old line card. You know, name, company size, DUN numbers, contract vehicles, etc. And you put it all the way to the end. But what your goal in that meeting is to get the government to say, yeah, we need you to come in and help us do this. And then it's, oh, by the way, I'm also going to help you meet your small business goals. I noticed that you all were having a little bit of a tougher time with that in your agency. And again, always focus on your value and what you solve. It's not about your company, not about your status. It's about the person on the other end, the problem they have, and how you fix it. When you are conducting emails, phone calls into a government agency, and I do quite a bit of cold calling for my clients, the reason we get meetings, the reason people are talking to us is because we're able to show that we have an understanding of what their challenges are. We get them on the phone and we go through it. And all of your websites, and you know, honestly, with everything with social media today, these should be great equalizers for you against, you know, larger companies or people. There's no, it really allows us small businesses to play on the same field. Always show the problems that you solve based on what you read in that targeted area. Now, I know we went through an enormous amount of information. I will be open at the end of this to stay on the horn or talk to you outside of this presentation about how answering some of these questions. But it's my privilege right now. I've known Ed for a long time. Ed was a senior capture manager over at SAIC, and I will tell you, when you're bidding deals, it always comes down to 2 or 3 companies that are really qualified to win. And I've noticed with people that I know that have worked with Ed's company that he helps them get over that. He did this at SAIC for a long, long time. You will enjoy his slide deck. He and I talked about this at great length last night. I think you're in for a real treat here. So, Ed, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thanks, Jimmy. What you heard in the first 2 presentations by Sean and Jimmy is a systematic approach to business development, identifying the opportunities, the way to get into the government information, so that you know what it is you should be bidding, and you're not wasting your time going to agencies that don't have money or don't have money in areas that you have expertise. And the tips that Jimmy gave you in the end about the focusing on the client is just so critical. You can't rest on your laurels of being a small business or being in one of the preference programs. There are no laurels. There are no laurels there. The client really doesn't care that much. If they can check a box, that's fine, but they're really going to go on with their business. Here's a checklist of 11 items that I call my essential 11 items. They're not really mine. I just accumulated these 11. And I think they're important to pay attention to. You need to be doing each one of these things very well to be competitive with the firms that really are the leaders in the industry. Whether or not you've graduated from your program and you're still competing in a smaller pond, the impact of the larger firms is really going to be felt in that pond, number one. And number two, many of your competitors are filling in their process gaps and paying attention to these 11 items. And I'll run through them really carefully. But you should have a check in every one of them. And if you don't, you want to call that out as a material weakness. Do you have ways to measure the health of your business development program? If you can't measure it, you probably don't really know where you stand in terms of how much you're investing and whether you're making enough of an investment or too much of an investment so that you're spread too thin and you're not going to meet your goals. Bidding frequency is really part of that as well. You want to bid enough to meet your financial goals, but not so much that you're spread too thin. How do you scale that and gauge that? Resource allocation is really important. Once you determine what your goals are, how do you allocate those resources to, for example, task orders and follow-on, to new opportunities? Do you have a way to establish a meaningful bid list and manage that bid list? Does your staff, does your capture teams, or you if you're running that organization, or you're running the capture yourself, do you get the right bid pursuit information? Or are you defaulting to program information rather than business information? Are you getting the competitive information that you can use to make a bid decision, or are you getting program information that only makes you understand better what the client is doing and may be looking for? That's not the competitive information. Do you have a way to put this all together to make no bid decisions on opportunities that you clearly can't win, and do you make those early in the capture pursuit process? How do you keep leads from languishing on the bids? What do you do about teaming? How do you make sure that you're ready to go when the RFP comes out so you're not struggling that first week? How do you make sure that your proposal process is moving smoothly, which means getting high scores in the red team, or do you not take that very seriously, or do you not do a red team? And what can you do post-proposal in order to win? If you're not doing all of these things, then just take the checklist out and start to work on those things. Or call somebody who knows how to do it. I want to talk about important business capture metrics. In the last presentation that we did, I talked generally about pipeline management, but I want to take one aspect of pipeline management and just take a look at business capture metrics and show you why they're important, number one, but number two, show you that you can actually calculate them so that you can scale your resources to meet your business goals. So I'm going to define some of the metrics that I use, and I think they're really pretty complete, because what the metrics do is they take the temperature, the heart rate, the pulse rate, the lung capacity of your business development program, and I would maintain that those vital signs also measure the health of your company, not just your business development program. The basic measure I call firm contract backlog, and that's a measure of the urgency of your business development program. If your firm contract backlog is low, you've got a problem coming up pretty quickly. Qualified proposal backlog measures the stability of your bid pipeline, because it's where the replacement is going to come from for your firm contract backlog, and it's where your growth is going to come from directly. Qualified leads backlog is earlier opportunities that are not as far along in the capture pursuit maturity, and it indicates the vitality of the marketplace. If you can't find leads and you've got a good process to identify them, like ePipeline, that means you probably have to look at a new marketplace. It means you don't have a vital market, or the services that you have in a marketplace that might be vital are not the ones the clients are buying. And finally, sales efficiency really tells you how good your process is and whether you're getting enough of a return on each dollar of investment that you're making. Here are two firms to illustrate what firm contract backlog really means. And firm contract backlog is the sum of revenue from known sources, whether they're in your contract or not, but they're drop-dead known sources that year in and year out provide your funding. And I've got two firms, one I call the relaxed and one I call the frantic, and you can see the waterfall chart really differentiates between the two. Seemingly this company looks like it's in good shape, and seemingly this one looks like it's not in such good shape. And in order to get level and actually grow, it's got to have a very robust business development program to fill in that gap and lead the company forward. Really, the firm contract backlog tells you what's in your refrigerator, what's stored in your freezer in order to keep your business going and active. I'm going to run through an example of a company I call the Federal Consulting Group. I'm going to take its temperature, its blood pressure, and its heart rate. And let's assume that the company is predominantly a organization that has multi-year task order contracts. That's the contract profile. Let's say its current year revenue is $10 million. It's looking for a growth rate of 20%. And let's just run this through the analytics and see what we have to do with our business development program. So this is an example that comes out of my training, which obviously I organized originally in 2008. And you can see that in 2008, if the company had a $10 million backlog, it would need 12 and then 14 and then a little more than 17. And finally, in 2013, it'd be almost a $25 million company. Pretty good growth. But let's take a look at the firm contract backlog for this organization, and I just made these numbers up. But let's assume that it has EPA, DOD, DOT, and HUD as their clients, and in FY08, its firm contract backlog from these sources total $10 million. It grows a little bit just from these sources, not new sources. These are just current sources. It grows a little bit in 2011 because it looks like EPA probably maybe wasn't a full year in 2008, and now it's a full year, and it runs for a while, and then it starts to drop off. And you can see the waterfall effect here, and the firm contract backlog starts to drop till finally it drops off completely in 2013. Well, that's not what the company wants to do. It wants to get to 24 million by here. So let's see what its firm contract backlog looks like. I like to use a factor of 5 years to determine the firm contract backlog, because if you're working on multi-year, multi-million dollar task order contracts, they usually have 5-year windows, 5-year contracts with new options issued each year. And I use a benchmark of 5 times revenue as a good firm contract backlog guide. It's not set in stone, but as a guide just to maintain the business. So in this case, let's see what we've got. We've got a firm contract backlog of 11 plus 10 plus 7 plus 2. We've got only 30 million in the firm contract backlog. That means that we are $20 million short to make it to 50 million. Never mind growing, just getting to the maintenance level, we've got to find $20 million just to maintain the status quo. That's why I call this urgency. The firm contract backlog is a measure of urgency. This firm is in an urgent situation because it needs $20 million, and hopefully it's got that already in its proposal backlog, its later stage business pursuits, or it's going to be in trouble at some point in the future. It has to happen. Qualified proposal backlog is another one of the health measures, and it indicates the stability of the business capture program. And what that is the sum of qualified submitted proposals that are well researched, that have compelling win themes, and that vetted with the clients. And don't know why that typo is there. And it's calculated by summing up the values of the submitted bids, discounted to reflect customer budgets and spending history and your win rate. And I like a guideline of about 4 times revenue as a good benchmark for qualified proposal backlog. That'll get you about a 75% win rate, excluding recompetes. And as I say down here, these are only guidelines. They may not apply to your business. These guidelines need to be scaled to the cadence, the business cadence of your company. They work pretty well for multi-year, multi-million dollar contracts if that's your contract profile. But if you're an energy efficiency company and you're doing small jobs and you only get a 3-month backlog window, then these numbers change dramatically. But let me run through some numbers here. Let me make some assumptions here, and I'll show you how this all fits together. Let's assume that these are the submitted proposal. This is the submitted proposal backlog. So we've submitted 4 proposals, and for convenience, I made them all the same size. $40 million is in our proposal backlog, 5-year contracts. But we know from experience, maybe from talking to the client, maybe from looking at the documents that Jimmy pointed you toward, that the client doesn't have that amount of money. And I'm just making these assumptions that it only has 40%, 50%, and 50% of the actual proposal value that it's really going to be able to pay for. So that's the difference between contract capacity and what the client really has to spend. And I'm using a 75% win rate because here these are well-qualified opportunities. They've run through a process that you vetted them through the various stages of pursuit so that you're only bidding very well-qualified opportunities. Opportunities in which you know the playing field is level. There's no one out ahead of you or ahead of the field, so it's a level playing field. You know you're on that playing field. The client considers you credible and worthy of an award. You're a low-risk solution for them or a low-risk choice. And perhaps you've tilted that playing field in your direction to a certain extent so that statistically, if you're only bidding late-stage pursuits, which means they're well-qualified opportunities, your win rate is going to be up in the 75% range. Well, it could be 60%, but it's not in the 20% range. In the 20% range, that would mean that you're not your pursuits are really immature rather than very mature. Well, here's one that I would have to say is sort of a flyer. We're giving it a 40% probability, so it's really a stage 2 or 2.5 in the construction that I use in my training. So if I just multiply these together, 10 times 0.4 times 0.75, I get an expected value over here of 2.5 and so forth, a total of $12 million. So what that means is that if I have enough proposals here, enough submissions, and 4 to 6 is enough, statistically, if the win rates are correct, and they're correct if you've run the opportunities through a disciplined process through certain stages so that you have well-qualified opportunities, then $12 million is really what you're going to get out of the end of your bid pipeline, your capture investment. Remember that our growth rate was 20%, so we don't want to just replace the $30 million. We also want to grow. And 20% means that our total revenue, firm contract backlog plus the gap, has got to be $90 million. Well, our contract backlog was only $30 million, so we've got to drive $60 million out of our proposal backlog, and I've only got a piece of it here, in order to meet that goal. Well, $60 million over 5 years is $12 million. So if each year I have a business development program that results in an expected value of $12 million, I'm going to end up with the $60 million. So I can calculate what my target expected values need to be, total expected values need to be each year in order to meet a particular growth rate. And that's important because you only have so many dollars to invest. So the next step would be whether there's enough money to get that number of bids out, and if not, what do you do about it? Do you invest maybe in improving your processes to get your bid rates up, bidding better things, making better teaming agreements, but at least you know that you don't have enough money allocated out of your business development program to get enough bids out to meet your financial goal. Maybe you need to change that financial goal. Without that information, you're making very uninformed decisions about how to invest your indirect dollars, your B&P money. I call the proposal backlog the stability of the organization, because that's where the real growth and the replacement dollars are going to come from. So qualified leads backlog are earlier stage pursuits, and they're lower probability because you haven't gotten the pursuit to the maturity of the ones that you've already submitted your proposals on. So you need to bid more there. So in your leads backlog, in your early stage pipeline, you really need about 6 times current revenue in order to come down to having 4 times revenue in your proposal backlog in order to maintain your growth rate. So these metrics fit together in a way that enables you to drive your revenues towards the financial goals that you're trying to meet. So if you're a fisherman and you can't find any fish, which means you can't find much to bid on, it's time to maybe become a farmer and change your market or change your services. So the qualified leads backlog, if you can't get to around 6 times current revenue, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your process, although there might be. But if there isn't, and you've got a good systematic way to identify those opportunities through whatever sources, conferences, business intelligence services like ePipeline, good contacts within the agency, and things are not coming up, it's time to expand your market. I said that we were going to cover in the presentations 2 of the questions that people had asked us, which was really the reason why we put this session together. What are the important mandates impacting your small business, and what does that mean? And I think what you got from Jimmy is that there are mandates that impact your business, but that's not why you're going to win work. You still have to be good. You still have to get the marketing done. You still have to do the pavement pounding. And there's no shortcut here just because you have a preference. You're in a preference program. And I discussed how you create a bid list for 2013 that will realistically support your financial goals. And using the pipeline analytics is a very, very strong way to do that. If you can't measure it, you really don't know much about it, and here's a good way to measure it. So with that, let's take a look at the rest of the questions that are on the list. So Jimmy and Sean, we didn't practice how we're going to do this, but let's kind of run down this a little bit quickly. Jimmy, you kind of hit this. How does the government really view your small business? Want to reiterate that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion, it's always been sort of a simple equation. It's the risk associated with your company to a certain amount of money. So if you're a 5-person company, they're probably not going to give you an $8 million contract. If you're a 50-person company, $2.5 million is probably more realistic, and they're going to look at the risk that you would bring to the government based on your ability to perform. So it's, again, not a negative. It's just, does this company match with what we need? So smaller companies, shoot your sights on what you can handle. Maybe you go after $500K to $1 million opportunities. Maybe it's $250K to $500. But one of the things that will frustrate you is, and the government will not give you more if you go past what they view as your risk level.
Have you seen counterexamples? I mean, I've seen some examples where some pretty small firms have won some large contracts. What do you think is happening there? Because I scratched my head and said, but I don't think they can do that.
Where I've seen it in particularly happen, and there's one company, I'm not going to name them, that I was actually doing some intelligence on right now through a task order, but where I see a lot of growth for small businesses, and I'm talking where you have one of those years where you go from $1 million in revenue to $10 million, is I see it through task orders and a lot of partnerships. So the government has set up this structure through, you get a large company with a bunch of other companies, and that's the vehicle, and they're going to put that through there. And I've been able to see a lot of growth for companies through the task orders. And these are things that you can track through the federal procurement data system, you can look at. But where I've seen a lot of growth happen is that you're kind of under that umbrella of this large GWAC, and you can get different kind of task orders and build that way, kind of with the backing of a larger team. I also, though, Ed, frankly, when I was the director of 8A, we did a mix. I mean, we teamed with your former company. We tried to prime everything that we could to get our own past performance.
Which kind of leads us to the lessons you learned as a Director of Business Development for Startup 8A. I've got a few that I want to offer up too, but what do you think are the most important things 8A should be paying attention to while they're really immersed in the program?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I've been around long enough where I remember the heyday of the 8A program where you could breathe and be an 8A and contracts would literally come your way. The game's changed quite a bit. Probably the best lesson that I ever learned is don't spend time chasing people that will offer you purse strings into an agency or groups or conferences and all that other stuff. I think they're time wasters. Figure out what the agency's problem is, validate your research, and go meet with them directly. You know, be the master of your own ship in that area. And I've literally seen scenarios, and I can tell you story after story where I've gone in with a small business to a government person, showing them the problem that we fixed, and they'll say to us, go to CSC, go to SAIC, we want to add you in on this. But I think there's sometimes this notion that if you go to all these fairs and you get in all these databases and you do all this stuff, somehow it's going to come to you. And maybe it does. I never experienced that. It was, get command. There is no one that's going to take you in magically to a company. When you do a partnership, it's really about you bringing someone else a deal, and then they throw some things your way. But become the master of your own ship. Get command of how you really fix things and focus on that. Because a lot of what I saw, there's a lot of smoke around the beltway of stuff that never really happens.
Right, and I think that as a rule is true of all small businesses, not just 8A, that you've really got to grab the reins yourself, do the marketing yourself, establish the position with the client yourself, and not rely on a larger business to drag you along. Not that they can't or that doesn't happen, but even if they are pulling you along and it's a legitimate relationship, you still need to establish those relationships with the client directly to really be successful.
Yeah, and that's generally, and it's funny, as a startup business, I think about the work that we ultimately got. It's where we knew the client. I mean, we took shots at all kinds of things, but, again, I know that sounds very simple to a really big problem, but if you're not doing that, if you're just responding to stuff, you haven't met the customers, and I think, Ed, you're giving people gold today. I mean, take this stuff very seriously. When you go after a bid, you've got to be able to support why you're in there. You've got to make sure that your record's clean, that you're looking good, and that you are really competitively priced. Because there's only a couple companies when you have a bunch go after that are really targeted to win. And I think Ed gave you some guidelines. And like I said, where you don't have these skill sets, go and get them, because it makes all the difference of winning and losing in this place.
And something that I always think about, and I didn't always work for large companies. I mean, I cut my teeth at SAIC, but I was a partner in two small businesses that we grew actually dramatically, and we sold them to public companies, one to DynCorp, now CSC, and the other to SRA International. Let's see, what was I about to say?
Well, you're talking when you were building up the small businesses.
Right. Just slipped my mind. I had something extremely incisive to say about that, but I'll have to come back to it because it just slipped my mind. I think I'm having a senior day.
I think ultimately, too, that's a lot of small businesses' plans. If you build something up big enough, you're going to get picked up, and we see that quite a bit around the Beltway. Ed, one of the questions I have for you, and I always guide my clients. There's some really good lawyers around town. There's Ken Brody out there and rest. There's other people that can help you with this. But when you go into subcontracting, I think one of the things that people need to be aware of is there's some real dangers that you can get absolutely have the screws put to you. Because remember, no one's in business to give it away. And I think there's some really important things that, as small businesses, we will get beat down for year one rates really, really bad without a promise. And we're desperate to get in a place, get people going, and all that other stuff. What are some of your lessons, though, just as a large business that's subbed, and then as a small business that probably subbed to bigs? What are some of the things that you picked up along the way?
It all depends on personal relationships. You don't sub to a firm. You sub to a division or a division manager or a program manager, someone who's there that's either going to look out for your interest or not. But the company as a whole is not going to look out for your interest. There's nobody in SAIC or Booz Allen administration looking out for small businesses. They do track goals, and they may put some pressure down there. You've got to establish the relationships within the organization that owns the contract, and those relationships are just like client relationships. If you have client relationships as well, it makes those relationships with the prime easier, because the client is really looking for you to perform. And because when the financial reports are due, and the division manager has to tell them about the month, what happened that month, they're going to reduce subcontracting, whether it's small business or not, much faster than they are going to move their staff off if there's any issues on those contracts, or if they're not meeting their financial goals. So those personal relationships might buffer you from that a little bit, and having the client contacts is a way to ensure that the work you think you're going to get, you're actually going to get. I think that the subcontracting agreements, you want to make them as ironclad as possible. You have your leverage with the large firm peaks when you sign that subcontracting agreement. After that, you don't have any leverage. So you want to make sure that subcontracting agreement is exactly the way you want it, because you can't go back and redo it. Your leverage drops considerably after that. Now, if you have great relationships, that can mitigate that quite a lot. Before we move on, I've gotten through my senior moment. I remember what I was going to say. Sometimes it's tempting to go after an opportunity that's not particularly well vetted, not very far along the pursuit maturity curve, or to the higher stages, the later stages. I call those not very well qualified opportunities. They're really still part of the glacial debris. You don't quite know where you are in the competitive playing field. Once in a blue moon, you win those, just enough to make you maybe want to do more of that. But if you're doing something last minute, my advice is don't, unless you're already close to the client. You're in that office, they know you, and something comes through that maybe you just didn't know about, but you're still well positioned. If you're not well positioned, don't go after it, because bids are expensive. And I'd rather take those dollars and not spend them on a losing bid, but invest them in a successful marketing effort, and go in and see the clients that have the money, that meet the criteria that Jimmy was talking about, new money, new programs, things that you can do, and position yourself for opportunities coming out there, rather than wasting your dollars in areas that you're not going to win because you haven't really qualified them very well. So I don't like lost leaders. I'd rather take that money and invest it in the marketing and business development program. So what do businesses do wrong when they're presenting to the government? You hit a couple of things. They talk about themselves.
I think the biggest thing that I think businesses do wrong is talk about themselves. Let me give you all a very specific example. What I am getting ready, I have a huge meeting with a client of mine next month, and we're presenting to a really, really high up person in government. We did all the research, got the meetings, and we were monitoring this fellow in Yammer and hearing some of the books that he's reading. So as we're getting ready for our presentation, I'm reading the book right now. I just ordered it off of Amazon to get ready for that. And all my point is to you is that when people in senior level of government, they come in, they want to impact things, they want to change things, they're dealing with problems. And if you come at them as having solutions or whiteboard ideas or whatever have you to help them fix these things, you're going to do a lot better. And when you send them over their agenda of why they're meeting with you, then, hey, we're just a small business, we're looking to see what you have.
Mm-hmm.
And just, again, keep that keen focus on that. The other thing I've seen small businesses do, too, is that they will, you get a lot of poor me crying in the meetings. They will, and no one's there to really monitor that. They want to know how you're fixing them. Just to further the point, just so I can kind of give the audience how the government's listening, I was speaking in Atlanta, and I was doing a seminar on my book, and I had a crowd of about 40, 50 people, and I was going through how you do an unsolicited proposal, how you find out what the government's thinking and all this, and I had someone auditing the room from the government, and lady raised her hand. She said, I'm here to audit it, and she says, I got to tell you, if you all would do what this gentleman is saying and approach us with our words, our phrases, we're going to be way more inclined to listen to you than if you just come at us with your company, because again, it has less to do about you and more to do about the customer. So if you can stay away from that and really shorten, and I've taken 50 to 70-page slide decks from a client and made them 5 to 7, because no one can retain that. And after they meet you, they're basically going to remember this, and this is actually proven from a couple different studies at universities, but they will retain whether they liked you or not, or one or two things about your company. And if you focus all that time on how you fix things for them, that's probably a good walk away to have as you get ready to have your next steps. And I think that would be the other thing. Always have a next steps with a meeting. And if the government doesn't say, get up and say, hey, what are the next steps? What do we do? Always make sure you have a connecting to another meeting or an action or providing data back. That's paramount when you're presenting.
Let's hit this next one very quickly because I want to get to questions. There's several in there. So
Sure.
what can we tell graduating ADAs or any firm graduating from its preference program?
Good luck. All joking aside, the smart 8As that I've seen do it, I've seen a lot of smart companies get government work, get the 8A status, grow the 8A business, and then they parallel that expertise where they can go full and open. And even while they're in the 8A program, they do a lot of the competition that way, so they're preparing themselves to leave the program.
Here's a quick question. We just got our first GSA schedule. Does this give us a competitive advantage? The answer is absolutely no. Would you agree with that?
I think you need to have a GSA schedule to compete. Let me tell you though, where it can give you an advantage. I mean, it's commonplace that most people need you to have a GSA schedule. But one of the things that I've noticed is that when the government goes through GSA, typically it's not this large procurement. It's a couple of people. They can award on best value to the government, and it's a great way to sell through. And you can go out and do the numbers yourself, but look at all the companies that sell through their GSA schedule. It's a phenomenal way to grow your business through an established vehicle. But what you're going to need to do that is to really have a run rate of what agencies you're targeting, and much like Ed talked about, how much money you're going to put in the pipeline to go after. And that's one we can take offline. I'm glad you got it because you need it. It's important to have.
Let's see, we got one comment, but we only got one question, and the comment was, much too much material to go over here. Will this be available online so I can look at it again? Absolutely, yes. We're going to get this webinar up very quickly, and also we'll make the slides available to you in the next day or so. We went through those questions. Actually, I was going to pull those up and go through them. But let's just talk about a couple of things before we let people go. We're out of time, but we got a couple of offers here. So if you could just bear with us for a second, and also fill out the survey at the end. It really helps us to refine the webinars as we move forward. So Jimmy, you're going to discount your book. Good for you.
Yeah, just a quick update. What I'm offering for everyone, if you contact me before December 19th, show me your receipt where you got my book, either from Amazon or in Kindle. I mean, just, hey, we ordered it. I'll set up something with you before the end of the calendar year, and I'll spend 30 minutes with you on the phone, and we can talk about any of the stuff. So I'm offering a free 30-minute consulting session when you email me your receipt. I encourage you to pick up a copy of the book. Much of what I talk to is in far greater detail, and you can get it through Amazon pretty easily.
Great. And, whoops, Jimmy and I both do consultation over the phone, and in our last session, 3 people talked to me with issues that they had, and I'm not selling in these sessions. I just want to help you, and I've been at large companies and small companies, and I can help in so many different ways. If you have a question, if you're facing an issue as a small business, just give me a ring. and I'll see what I can do to answer your question or try to send you to a person who can. The other thing I'm doing is combining my business acquisition training course and the business acquisition tracker, which is a server-based pipeline management system that is designed the way a senior business development manager would want to manage their bid pipeline to meet your goals. It has all the analytics in it that I talk about in the training course. I have a single version, desktop version of the business acquisition tracker, the BAT. I'm going to combine the two of them, and for the first 10 people that are interested in it, I'm going to sell them both for $4.95. I haven't put them together yet, but if you just send me an email and say that you're interested, or give me a ring and say that you're interested, I'll reserve it for you. You can take a look. If you don't like it, you don't have to keep it. But the training, I think, is eye-opening. That's what people tell me, and it gives you the tips you need in order to really have a much more effective program. It's built around those 11 essential elements. And even if you're not a business development manager, if you're at the staff level, this will really help change the trajectory of your career if you understand these business development tips, and the software comes right along with it. And it scales up to the server version. So if you're a small business, you can really manage your whole pipeline. You can get all of the analytics there. You get your management tools, the CRM part of that, and it will scale right up to the server version. So you've got really quite a deal there. And then Sean, as far as
if everybody is interested in identifying, qualifying more business within the government sectors and an easier solution than you're probably utilizing on your own now, getting a lead time above fbo.gov. I'm offering a 20% off the regular rates, a free 2-day trial to ePipeline, and I'll be willing to meet with any of you in a WebEx meeting to walk you through the complete solution one-on-one.
And I think ePipeline is incredibly affordable, by the way. The most affordable, and I think probably the best solution to turn to.
Appreciate that, Ed.
Okay, we're running our next event on the 22nd. The website, and I thought I had it up here, but I guess I didn't put it on. The website is open. I'm going to send everybody an email with a link to that event, and we're going to take a look at what the fiscal cliff, the sequestration, whatever's happened in December into January, what does that really mean as far as the federal budget is concerned? So we're going to get our heads together in early January and tell you what we think and how you can either benefit from it or the pitfalls that we think that you need to be aware of and ready for. And here's our contact information if you're interested in following up with any of us. And we'll get this information out along with free access to the recorded version of the webinar, and that'll be up by tomorrow. And so on behalf of Jimmy and Sean, I thank you for sitting through the webinar. Almost everyone who signed in at the beginning stayed to the end, so we all appreciate that.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Yep, happy holidays. Thank you.
Happy holidays.
And please fill out the survey at the end. That does help us. So thank you very much, and hopefully you'll be on our next session.